Dr. Amanda Guthrie is the Senior Veterinary Officer overseeing the clinical program at the ZSL London Zoo, the world's oldest scientific zoo, which opened to the public in 1847. The zoo houses 10,000 invertebrate and 10,000 vertebrate animals. Dr. Guthrie oversees a team of 2 clinical veterinarians, 1 veterinary resident, 4 veterinary nurses, and various support staff. She also occasionally provides clinical cover for the ZSL Whipsnade Zoo, where larger animals such as elephants and rhinos reside. Additionally, Dr. Guthrie oversees the European College of Zoological Medicine Residency Program. Dr. Guthrie's past zoo experience includes several zoos in the United States, such as the Virginia Zoo in Norfolk Zoo, Boise in Idaho, and the Gladys Porter Zoo in Texas. Dr. Guthrie has been the primary author on numerous scientific papers published in journals such as the Journal of the American Veterinary Medical Association, the Journal of Zoo and Wildlife Medicine, the Journal of Wildlife Diseases, and the Journal of Avian Medicine and Surgery. Before embarking on her career as a zoo vet, Dr. Guthrie worked for several years as a small animal and exotics practitioner in the United States. She earned her Bachelor of Science in Animal Science in 2001 and her Bachelor of Science in Political Science in 2002, graduating cum laude for both from North Carolina State University. Dr. Guthrie earned her DVM degree with honors in 2006 from the University of Illinois College of Veterinary Medicine. She attained diplomate status in the American College of Zoological Medicine in 2014 and diplomate status in the European College of Zoological Medicine in 2016. Welcome to the podcast, Dr. Amanda Guthrie. Thank you so much for being here.
Hello, thank you for having me.
I visited London once, very briefly, many years ago, and it was just for a couple of days, and the most vivid memory I have is, of course, of Big Ben and standing on that bridge and having a bunch of pigeons land on my head in one of the public parks. Like, they were just so bold. But anyway.
Yeah, there are a lot of pigeons and ducks and geese, and people feed them a lot, which is unfortunate. But it's a beautiful city. Yeah,
it is.
I'm having so much fun here.
Yeah, it's gorgeous. Now, your accent, from reading your CV, I expected that you were American, and then just ended up in London. But I'm not. But your accent is bizarre to me. I mean, not bizarre, but I don't recognize it. What is it?
People say that a lot. I grew up in North Carolina, so I have a Southern accent, but I think it is a little unusual because people ask me about it all the time. So you're not unique in that perception.
Okay, so it's a Southern accent of somebody who's been living in London for
Yeah, and I've lived all over the place, so maybe it's changed over the years, but yes, definitely Southern. I lived the first 22 years of my life in North Carolina, and my parents are very Southern and have very thick Southern accents.
Okay, cool. So why did you decide that you wanted to be a veterinarian originally?
I have never even considered being anything else. I'm one of those people who knew as a teeny tiny child, even before I knew what being a veterinarian was, somehow, I consider myself so lucky, but I've always known that's what I wanted to do. My family is a big animal family. My dad's in the beef cattle business and is an avid hunter, is really into wildlife. We grew up with dogs, cats, every pet under the sun. And I've always been very animal oriented, and I've just always been around animals, and I just knew somehow that the science and medicine and animals were something that would suit me. And I've always been laser focused on that. And I feel like I'm so lucky to be one of those people who knew what they wanted to do.
Yes. Rather than, taking the long winding road and maybe going down a bunch of blind paths, which is what I did. But so it was a straight shot for you. And what was the path like in general? Like, did you enjoy it? Did you enjoy vet school? Anything surprising about vet school?
Yeah, I loved it. I went to NC State for undergrad, North Carolina State University, did an animal science degree, and I loved it. I love the hands-on agriculture or work with, cows and horses and pigs and all that sort of stuff. I absolutely loved college, and I loved vet school. It was really the time in my life when I was the most inspired and motivated. It was just where to be there, honestly. And so I know that's a really rosy, rosy picture. Not that it wasn't hard work all along the way, and I love studying and being a student. I always say that if there was any way to live not so poorly and be a student, I would be a student forever. But at some point, you just, have to get a job and make money, unfortunately.
That is so unfortunate, isn't it? Because I loved vet school too for the same reason. Like you were just
But,
there learning, and every day you were learning.
but
Yeah. So you, after you graduated from University of Illinois College of Veterinary Medicine, you initially started out as a small animal and exotics veterinarian, and that was in Las Vegas. Hey, that's
in Vegas, yeah.
just 4 hours from me. So did you initially think that you were going to be a small animal exotics clinician?
No, when I was in undergrad, I did several different summer internships. And one summer, I spent the summer at the Philadelphia Zoo, and I absolutely fell in love with the zoo and being at the zoo. And I wanted to be a zoo veterinarian. And much like a lot of things, when you're in vet school, everyone says it's really difficult to be a zoo vet. Don't get your hopes up. It's very competitive, so on and so forth. And so I sort of had that goal, and luckily at Illinois, they had a lot of wildlife and zoo stuff to do. So I was very active in all the extracurricular zoo, exotic, and wildlife stuff. And actually, fourth year, they allowed us to do a custom track. And so I actually developed a custom curriculum and spent a lot of time doing zoo and wildlife stuff away from the university fourth year, which was amazing.
Oh my gosh.
Which was really great. And I really enjoyed Illinois largely for that reason, because they allowed us a lot of flexibility, which a lot of schools don't do. However, I sort of came to the decision, though, and I was unwilling to do a small animal internship after fourth year because I just couldn't. After fourth year, I just couldn't do it.
Yeah, I was going to ask you because I looked over your resume. I'm like, where did she do her internship? And there's nothing there.
Yeah, I didn't. I just went into practice. I did apply for a few exotic internships, but didn't get any. And so I just decided I was going to go into practice and kind of do it the alternative way. I just could not bear the thought of a small animal internship. It just wasn't for me. So I went into practice, and the practice I was at in Vegas was really great and fun, and saw a lot of exotics. And so I got a lot of exotics experience right out of the gate in my first job.
And then I noticed that after your first job, then you transitioned to a small animal clinic in Texas, and you were doing part-time at the small animal clinic and part-time at the Gladys Porter Zoo.
Yep, and that was my first zoo job. I got paid $25 an hour, no benefits, to do that job, and I was happy to do it. It was the way I sort of broke into the business, and I really appreciate them giving me that opportunity. And so I worked 3 or 4 days a week at the zoo and 2 or 3 days a week at the small animal clinic for 2 years.
So when you decided to move from Las Vegas to Texas, was it because of this zoo? Like, were you looking for zoos that would just give you, a window into zoo medicine?
Absolutely. And that's the thing about this business, is you have to be willing to be open to opportunities and pack it up and go where they are, because as you might imagine, there aren't thousands of zoos hiring at any time. You really have to be flexible in this business and sort of go where the opportunities are. And I was willing to do anything at that point to get a zoo job.
Wow. How did you?
And it was totally worth every second of it. Like, I moved, I grew up in North Carolina, went to school in Illinois, moved to Vegas, then I moved to Texas, then I moved to Idaho, then to Virginia. And each time that was for a natural progression in my career, and it was totally worth it every time. And that's really paid off for me. And that's kind of what I tell people, is you have to seize opportunities when they come available to you. You can't wait around. And that's really paid off really well for me.
Amazing. How did you find out about the Gladys Porter Zoo? Were you just like randomly sending your resume to everybody, or were you
No, there was
calling?
a job advertisement. I mean, when you're in this business, you look at job advertisements a lot and search for job openings because they don't come around that often, you know? And
Right.
so it was a good fit because it was a part-time job and the pay wasn't amazing. So it wasn't fiercely competitive for experienced zoo vets, you know? So it was really a sort of foot in the door opportunity for somebody starting out like me. So it was perfect.
Wow. And where did you see the ad? Was it like in the Journal of the American Veterinary Medical Association?
No, it would have been on the AAZV website. The American Association of Zoo Veterinarians has job postings, and that's where almost all the zoo jobs, especially in America, but sometimes even overseas jobs are posted. And also on the AZA, the Association of Zoos and Aquariums, they post for veterinarians there. And so it's typical to check those job boards pretty regularly for job postings.
Great. I'll put those in the show notes because, so many people that I talked to, they said that they wanted to be a zoo vet, but, it was just too competitive. And so you're living the dream.
Yeah, and certainly luck plays into it a lot, I think. And definitely being in the right place at the right time and being willing to, pack it up and go on short notice. A lot of the job, I would say, most of the jobs I've had also have been like, can you be here in 2 weeks? And it's like, yep, I'll be there in 2 weeks. You have to be really willing to make sacrifices.
Wow. Wow. Okay. So if you start out at a small animal practice, you really want to do what Dr. Guthrie is doing. Don't sign a contract that requires you to give 3 months notice.
Yeah, good tip.
All right. And then so you moved on to, just tell me a little bit about like this is your first job as a zoo veterinarian. What was it like? And were you overwhelmed? I mean, because you say, how many animals were there? There were 340 species at the Gladys Porter Zoo. And I always say, okay, dogs and cats, 2 is enough.
But that's the fun part. That's the best part about zoo medicine is that you learn something new every day and working with a variety of species. That's the thing that's so exciting. The collection at Gladys Porter's at that time was about 1,500 animals. And honestly, I had excellent mentorship from Dr. Tom DeMar. And so he really helped me understand how to figure out what the heck was going on. I mean, obviously you don't just walk into a zoo and know how to take care of giraffe and rhino and frogs and snakes and lions. And so it takes an incredible amount of extra study and learning and practical advice from others and collaboration and mentoring. Because zoo medicine, I mean, the veterinary curriculum focuses on domestic species. You don't learn about reptiles and amphibians and practically nothing about birds or fish in a veterinary curriculum. And you certainly don't learn about, elephants and giraffes. And while we extrapolate a lot from domestic animals, I cannot emphasize enough the amount of extra work that goes into learning how to take care of these animals that are not a part of the traditional curriculum. And so that starts in veterinary school with clubs and activities and wildlife clinics and externships and rotations, and then it continues forever. But for me, that's the fun part, the continual learning, that every single day I get to learn something new and work on a new species. And in one day I might work on a frog, a snake, a monkey, an elephant, and anything in between. And that's the fun part. It's not mundane. There are no 2 days that are the same.
And so you had they had a full-time veterinarian there who could kind of who could mentor you.
Yeah, absolutely. And he was very experienced and had been in the business for a while. Yes, absolutely.
Wow. Okay. And then, so what was it that, was it the job that came up in Idaho and it was a full-time? Is that why you ended up moving? You were still looking for the full-time zoo?
Yeah, absolutely. The full-time opportunity, because after 2 years, I mean, I was very happy in Texas, and actually, at that time I was married, which maybe is not the best thing to put in the podcast, which I'm no longer married, but at the time my husband was pretty unhappy in Texas, and so he wanted to move away from there. So I probably wouldn't have been as aggressive about necessarily moving on, but certainly a full-time zoo job with benefits and paid vacation and that kind of thing was certainly appealing. And so that worked out really, really luckily for me too.
And Idaho is beautiful, I hear.
It is absolutely stunning. Yeah, it's like a total secret. People don't, think about Idaho, but it's so lovely. Yeah, I really loved it there.
Yeah, and Dr. Guthrie, if you want, I'm happy to, cut out anything about your husband, your divorce, whatever, but it's part of life. And
Sure. I mean, I don't have any, major problems about it, but that was kind of one of the things is he really wanted to get out of Texas. And so it maybe pushed me a little bit faster than I would have otherwise, because I was really happy there. And the people there were wonderful, and the zoo was great, and the collection was great. So I was pretty satisfied working there 3 or 4 days a week and learning with Dr. Tom. Although certainly moving to a full-time position was amazing and sort of gave me that independence. And I was at Boise by myself as the solo veterinarian. So it really, as you can imagine, sort of throws you into the fire.
Wow.
And is another really steep learning curve to do it by yourself.
Oh my gosh, I bet. And so it is actually something that I wanted to ask you about, because all this moving around that you do and, being able to be flexible, like I think of my life with like my husband and my dogs, and that would never work. In fact, if I were married to somebody else and he wanted to move around like that, I don't think that I could take it. So I was going to ask you, are you single when you're making all these moves? Because that really gives you a lot of flexibility, not having to worry about somebody else's life and what they want and their job.
Yeah, I was married for a little while when I lived, we got married in Vegas and moved to Texas and then moved to Idaho together and got divorced while I was in Idaho. But certainly, I don't have children, and now I am single. And my career has really always been my priority, and it would be a million times more difficult if I had children and a husband who had a career and all those sorts of things, certainly. I mean, and that's one of the reasons why I kind of think I'm very lucky, as from a career perspective, if at least that I've had that flexibility to just pack up and go when I need to go.
Yeah. Because
I realize not everyone has that degree of flexibility, certainly.
Right. When I was younger, I did live in all kinds of different places. I lived in Asia for 7 years, and that was my time to be fancy free. I'm nostalgic for it.
I love the moving around, and I love experiencing new places, and travel is my passion, and seeing new things, and so it's really important to me. And I've always said I just can't envision myself having a job for 25 or 30 years like people really used to do. I'm probably getting closer to that place, and now that I'm at ZSL, which is a really special organization, I can sort of see that more. But I've never been the kind of person that's like, I'm going to settle down here for 20 years. That's just not me. So that's made it easier too. A lot of it's about, personality and what you're willing to sacrifice in your life. And everyone has to make that decision for themselves,
Yeah, that's true. I love the sort of vagabond life, though. It's so exciting to me. I'm going to live vicariously through you.
It's when I left Virginia, I was in Virginia for 5 years. And when I left to move to London, I came here with 2 suitcases. I got rid of everything that I had, my car, everything, and just came here with 2 suitcases. So I'm all about minimalism and just,
oh my God,
life is an adventure,
That must have felt so liberating.
It was so cathartic. I cannot tell you. And not having a car, the car that I had was such a pain in the butt, and it always had problems, and it cost me so much money. And getting rid of that thing was one of the best. Definitely liberating is a good word for it, for sure.
Right. And living in London, I mean, do you even have a car?
No. And I wouldn't be able to afford to park a car if I had one. No.
But you don't need one anyway, right? I
No.
mean, they've got great public transportation and
I'm really lucky. Again, I live in central London in zone 1, and I walk through Regent's Park to work every day. It's about an 18-minute walk. So I mean, I take the tube and trains when I go out or when I go somewhere or go out on the weekends, but I don't even take the trains on a day-to-day basis. I typically walk everywhere, which is
wonderful.
also really good.
Oh, wonderful. Do you get to walk through like the little markets and pick up, dinner on your way home?
Yeah,
Ah, I love
yeah.
that. Oh, see, there's so much we Americans really need to learn from the Europeans.
It is, and I've never lived in a big metropolitan city before, and Americans, that's the thing I reflect back on when I lived in Virginia. I could have walked to work where I lived in Virginia, but I chose to drive, even though it was a less than a 5-minute drive. You just drive everywhere in America, and don't even really think about it, unless you live in Manhattan maybe. But yeah, I love walking everywhere. It's really good.
Oh, yeah. It's just such a cultural difference. I mean, when I drive down the street and I see somebody walking, I'm like, what's wrong with that person?
Exactly. Yeah, it's really funny.
Are
Yeah,
they homeless?
yeah.
Did their car break down? Plus, we don't
It
have
is
sidewalks, in a lot of.
exactly. Our cities aren't built for walking, and I've had a car since the day I was 16. Had a car, and I took a car with me to college and everything. So it is a big change to not have a car. Although I would say, agree, liberating is a very good word for it.
Uh-huh. Yeah. Oh gosh, I'm so jealous. But let's go back to your job at Boise. This was the first time that you were flying solo as a zoo veterinarian. So what were some of the resources that you had to use, when you had questions? Or did you call your old mentor back at Gladys Porter Zoo?
Yeah, certainly. Luckily, the zoo community is incredibly tightly knit, and I had a couple of great mentors in Idaho. Actually, there was a really great experienced zoo veterinarian, Dr. Klopaki, who's now at Cheyenne Mountain Zoo in Colorado, who was filling in there in Boise in the interim before they hired me. And then also the state veterinarian of Idaho, Dr. Mark Drew, is a very experienced and well-trained zoo and wildlife veterinarian. And they would not have survived without them. They were absolutely brilliant. So I would say all along the way, I've had amazing mentors that helped me. Also, Boise is an interesting place because it's very isolated geographically. The other closest big cities are Salt Lake City and Portland, which are both a few hundred miles away. So I also became really close with the vets in Salt Lake City at the Hogle Zoo. And they helped me a lot too with stuff. If I had a question, I could just shoot them an email or call them on the phone, and that kind of thing. So, I don't know what people used to do before the internet and email and cell phones and texting and how they managed to survive. But without these mentors and friends and colleagues along the way, certainly animals would have received less good care than they did, without the advice from these other people. So I'm sure you have a similar, how could any of us have survived without guidance and mentoring from other colleagues that have helped us along the way?
Mm-hmm. Well, when you were at Boise, do you have any memories that stand out as particularly exciting cases?
Oh, goodness. It's always so hard to remember these.
If you don't, that's okay. You can just tell me a memory from, some other zoo. I just figured
Yeah, I'll have to think. The things that always stick out in my mind most are kind of animals that I've hand reared along the way, because it's just so special to hand rear a baby animal and get to see it survive and thrive and go on to breed and, be happy.
Mhm.
I've hand reared quite a lot of different really unique animals, quite a few tiger cubs in different places, baby porcupines, meerkats, all different kind of little tiny baby marmosets. Actually, when I was in Boise, we hand reared a couple of cotton-top tamarins, which are little bitty, tiny, fuzzy South American monkeys. And when they're born, they weigh like 20 or 30 grams. They're teensy weensy. And so that is really special, to get to see an animal grow up and be independent. Those are the things that stick out in my mind, kind of.
God, it sounds amazing. And is something about zoo veterinary medicine that I don't think I appreciated before, like while I was in vet school. I mean, everybody thinks, oh, it's exotic, it's so exciting, you get to work with all these great, interesting animals. But I think my perception is, correct me if I'm wrong, but my perception is you also tend to be able to practice a really high standard of medicine. And, you often
Yeah.
get to collaborate with specialists, not only veterinary medical specialists, but even human medical specialists.
Yeah, that's a really good point. A lot of times people ask me what's the best part of the job, and it is one of the very best parts of the job is that the vast majority of the time, money is not a concern. That doesn't mean we spend $100,000 on every animal. What it means is I don't have to barter with a client about, will you please pay $100 to give this animal what it needs. And I've done private practice. I worked in private practices all through college, and I've worked in a couple as a veterinarian. And I find it extremely stressful and emotionally draining to have an animal that you cannot help because the client is either unwilling or unable to help that animal, and it goes home and you can't help it. And that is really hard.
Yeah.
And when I was in Texas, down in deep South Texas, a lot of the people down there are fairly impoverished. And so we would see quite a lot of parvo and distemper and heartworm disease and even Chagas disease and crazy stuff, and people that didn't have money to treat it. And it is so heartbreaking, and even feline leukemia, FIP, all kinds of stuff. And it is just so emotionally draining to send an animal home or to have to euthanize an animal with a fixable condition. So I've totally understand how difficult that is. And in the zoo business, one of the greatest gifts we have is that if an animal is suffering, we can euthanize it. We can make that decision. And if we need to spend money to do something and fix it on a specialist or medication or whatever that is, we can do that. And you're exactly right. We practice an incredibly high level of medicine. We're lucky in London that the veterinary college is right up the street. And so we call in their specialists all the time, to help us with ultrasound, endoscopy, surgery, orthopedics, all kinds of stuff. And it's an amazing resource, and our animals benefit so tremendously. And I don't think the average person that visits a zoo understands the incredible amount of care that these animals receive, and how well they're cared for. And that's something we're really proud of. And it's one of the best parts of the job that, I know that we can do what needs to be done without, arguing with a client about it. And that's an amazing gift.
Right. Oh gosh. And just the fact that you've said that from the very beginning that learning has been something that gives you joy, and makes you feel like life is wonderful. Like the learning that you get to be able to do when you practice that high standard of care and don't have to worry about somebody not being able to afford it, and being able to collaborate with all of those different specialists. It must just be like, I don't know. You're high on life
It's amazing.
every day.
And I think another of the best things about zoo medicine is that we are really learning and making discoveries, and that can help future animals. In December we had a case. One of our gorillas actually had to have a resection and anastomosis of part of her jejunum. And so we did that surgery, and we had specialists come in to ultrasound her and all that. And so we get to learn about conditions that can affect those animals and go on and help other animals, that are critically endangered and incredibly genetically valuable for the population. And another thing is that we do necropsies on every animal that dies.
Oh.
And so we get to follow a case from start to finish. And I cannot tell you how valuable it is to get to, see a patient, and if it dies or has to be euthanized, to get to do a necropsy and follow up and learn from that. And that's one of the things about private practice that you don't often get to do either.
So true.
Is, a dog comes in and it's sick and it goes home and dies, and you never know, you never get to learn from that case what happened.
Yes.
And so doing necropsies on everything not only is valuable for zoo medicine as a whole to contribute more knowledge, but to follow a case from beginning to end. And many of our animals we follow from birth until death, every single day of their life. And so we get to learn so much from that. And I think that's really cool too.
Oh, I am so glad you brought that up, because that is a topic that I find really fascinating, because, when human medicine was still like in frontier land, that is how they learned a lot of what we
Of
know
course.
now. Is they performed autopsies on everybody, and they figured it out little by little by little. And I had the same frustration in small animal medicine. I would want to do a
Of
necropsy
course.
or an
Yeah.
autopsy, because I wanted to know what happened, and I wanted to learn from it so that I could benefit my future patients. And clients, they don't, they don't like the idea of that, which I could understand. And even technicians, I did work at a hospital once where the medical director said, if they don't want the body back, or if they don't if they don't want the body back and they're just euthanizing and leaving, then his thought was it's okay for us to do a necropsy, because they had disconnected their relationship to their
Mhm.
pet's body. But even in cases like that, the technicians would get upset about doing
Hmm.
a necropsy. And so there's all this like social pressure not to do it now, which is so
Mhm.
unfortunate. And I think it holds us back in so many ways. So just another reason why I'm so envious. Yeah. So you mentioned also that you do, so working in the zoo and taking care of all of these animals is part of it, but another big part of it is wildlife conservation. And you alluded to it when you said what you're learning can help other species that are out there in the wild, maybe, on the endangered list or something like that.
Yeah, absolutely. There's really a huge crossover between how we care for and conserve free ranging animals and what we learn from captive species. And the reason we keep animals in zoos is for them to be ambassadors for their species in the wild, their colleagues, their friends, so that people care about conserving them. And there is so much that zoos have learned that contributes directly to wild animal conservation. We have learned about, for example, canine distemper in big cats. Big cats like lions and tigers get canine distemper. And there have been outbreaks of canine distemper in Africa that have really decimated lion populations. And we can learn a lot about vaccines in our captive animals and how the disease affects these animals and how we can better save these animals in the wild. It's a huge crossover. It's and we're really trying to become more integrated and work more closely with not only human medical professionals to understand zoonotic disease, but also wild, people in the field. So there's a huge crossover. And at an organization like ZSL, where I work now, our mission is saving animals in the wild. And so we go out in the field and do field work, and and collaborate with people both in the field and in zoos. And so there's a huge crossover, and it's not really that our job is only to take care of captive animals.
Mm-hmm.
That's not the reason most of us went into this business, is because we're passionate about saving animals in the wild. And what we do, and when we learn about the nutritional needs of these animals, or the cancers they get, or the infectious diseases they're susceptible to, or how we can protect them with vaccines, that directly may save some of these animals in the wild. And that's why we do what we do every day. So it's really about the big picture. I mean, certainly we care about the individuals, and on a day-to-day basis, we care for individual animals. We also treat animals as groups and as, herds,
Mm-hmm.
sort of, and as taxa, and we can learn a lot about their anatomy and physiology and diseases and all that sort of stuff, and that can directly correlate to saving these animals in the wild. So to me, it's not really separate. It's a huge, we're all contributing to this in some way. And I think the longer you're in this business, the more you want to sort of work in the field and help. And we all have these projects where we work in the field, and you can see, on my resume, some of the publications I've done, work with snakes, fungal disease, and chytrid and
Yes.
salamanders, and the Texas tortoise. And that's part of what we do, is to contribute to work in the field.
Right. And I actually highlighted that on your CV because I wanted to ask you about it. So, when you were at Virginia Zoo in Norfolk, you mentioned a couple of fieldwork projects that you did, and one was on snake fungal disease. And also, you mentioned a bunch of trips that you took to other countries like Costa Rica to work with sloths, and Thailand to work with the Asian elephants, and the Philippines to it says you were administering wildlife management workshops and working with the Philippines Biodiversity Conservation Foundation. So this is exactly what you're talking about.
Yeah, and capacity building and teaching is another big part of what we do. So when I was in Virginia, the zoo won a grant to go put on a workshop there for capacity building for people in the Philippines to care for wildlife. And I actually just got back last week from India teaching a course through ZSL and the University of Edinburgh and the Wildlife Institute of India. We had 30 students, and it was a 3-week long course about conservation and wildlife medicine, and we immobilized animals in the field and things. So another big part of what we do is teaching people around the world how to better care for wildlife, how to do disease surveillance, necropsies, immobilizations, all that sort of thing. So I guess most people don't understand probably the work that zoos do and the commitment we have to helping animals directly in the field. I think that's really, really important.
Wow. I didn't even understand it. Like, you're completely blowing my mind and opening my mind. It's amazing. I thought they were like completely different worlds, but not at
No,
all.
and it's really, I mean, the One Health initiative has sort of brought this more to the forefront too, but zoos, a part of our mission, any good reputable zoo, a huge part of our mission is wildlife conservation. That's why we exist. And certainly in the current climate with animal rights and animal welfare groups and media, we have to defend why do zoos exist? We have to answer that question. The reason we exist is to save animals in the wild, to breed animals in captivity, to ensure genetic variability in these animals, to safeguard these populations that are at intense risk in the wild, and to contribute what we learn to helping save these animals in the wild.
Wow.
And so our mission is so much bigger than just taking care of some animals that are in captivity. That's only actually a really small part of it in my perception.
Wow. Wow. And yeah, I mean, so 20 years ago, I think zoos didn't have as good of a reputation as they do now in terms of how animals are kept. And it seems like over the last couple of decades, and it's because of the work that's been done by zoo veterinarians like yourself, like learning about what their habitats are like in the wild, and what makes them happy and what they need, in terms of their home at a zoo. What do they need to make them happy? How much space do they
Sure.
need? What kind of activities do they need? So it
Yeah.
seems like there's
I
been a
hope
lot of.
that's true. Yeah, I do think zoos have made incredible progress, even in the short time that I've been, in the zoo business. And, when I was in veterinary school, I went to the Zoo Vet Conference and read the journal and stuff. And I can see an incredible change, even in I've been out of school 12 years now. The journal is so much better and more sophisticated. And the presentations we give at the conference are so much more professional and impressive and collaborative and just really amazing science. And so the profession is growing by leaps and bounds. 30 years ago, zoo veterinary medicine didn't really exist, and now it's a specialty and we learn so much. And it's a really exciting time to be part of this specialty because you can just watch it grow from year to year, and the work we're doing is really sophisticated. It's really exciting to see.
Mm-hmm. So, is there anything else that you wanted to talk about your experiences at the Virginia Zoo in Norfolk? Because if not, I'm anxious to move on to find out like how the heck you ended up in London. But
Sure.
I don't want to skip
No,
over.
nothing specific. Again, I moved to Virginia because it was a little bit bigger zoo, a little bit more interesting collection to me. At that time, it had elephants and great apes, and so it was just a natural progression in my career. I had a really great time there and really wonderful support, and did the work on snake fungal disease and things like that. So it was really awesome in my career. And that's during my time in Virginia is when I studied for boards and passed the ACZM boards. And so that 5-year period was really pretty profound in my career, certainly.
That's what I wanted to ask you about. Thank you for reminding me because, in small animal medicine, I know that usually you do an internship and then you do a residency, and the residency is in one particular hospital and one particular specialty, and so your work at the Virginia Zoo was like your residency, was it?
Yeah, it's interesting that ACZM and some of the other specialties, not many though, have an experiential pathway that doesn't require residency training. So they have credentials, obviously, that they require you to meet. For ACZM, you have to have been a full-time zoo veterinarian for 6 years and have 5 publications as a primary author in peer-reviewed journals and a few other professional things. But those are the main ones. And once your credentials are accepted, you can sit the exam. So it's kind of a way to build up the college over time, because there used to be very few residencies. Now there are quite a lot of residencies. So the college is growing pretty quickly. But, the college was started in the early 80s, but a long time ago there weren't that many residencies. So they had the experiential pathway to help build up the college.
Wow.
And so there are like I know the behavior college has that. I think dentistry has that. I know Therio has that, where you can do an alternative track, but not all of the specialties do that.
Right. Nutrition, I think, is one of them too. I met somebody who was doing that.
Sure. So I did, a lot of my publications and field work, and a lot of it's just hours in zoo practice in Virginia, certainly, to get up to that point.
And what kind of study materials did you have to help you pass your board exam?
Sure. We have a reading list that's pretty specific.
Okay.
We have several zoo textbooks and then several journals: the Journal of Zoo and Wildlife Medicine, the Journal of Wildlife Diseases, JAVMA, AJVR. There's a HERP journal and an avian journal and some others. So there's a specific reading list you have to study.
Okay. And so you get that in advance while you're doing your experiential
Exactly.
qualification.
So I studied for about 2.5 years in order to pass the exam. So it takes quite a lot of time. It's quite a lot of material that's on the reading list.
I bet. And what is the exam? Is it like, I don't know, 30% wildlife conservation, 30% common zoo species, and 30% zoo management, or
it covers, very briefly, that day one is 5 different multiple choice 5 different multiple choice tests. There's an avian test, a herp test, an aquatics test, a wildlife test, and a terrestrial zoo mammal test.
And when you say herp, it's herpetology.
Herpetology, which includes reptiles and amphibians, and reptiles and amphibians. So it does include everything from media and PR relations, statistics, epidemiology, zoonoses, things like that. But it's heavily anatomy, physiology, taxonomy, medicine, and surgery kind of thing. But it does cover a wide breadth of topics.
Yeah, and so when you were at the Virginia Zoo, you were the first full-time veterinarian at that zoo, and you were doing your experiential qualifications to sit for the zoo medicine boards, and epidemiology, like you mentioned, that's a huge part of what you do, and you're writing your papers, and you're figuring out which statistical analyses to use for your studies. Like, who taught you epidemiology?
Oh, goodness. Well, I definitely would not say that epidemiology nor statistics are my strong suits. You sort of just figure it out as you go and get people to help you. I'm not much of a stats person, so I don't do a lot of in-depth stats. My work is really more clinically focused because I'm not formally trained and I haven't taken graduate level courses in that stuff. Those are definitely not my strengths, but you do sort of have to dig up information about that to understand basic stats that are going to be represented on the exam. And a lot of that you can find within the literature in some different places, just doing literature searches and things. Those topics are not huge proportions of the exam, so you don't have to spend a disproportionate amount of time on those particular topics for the exam specifically.
Okay. All right. Well, then, when you left the Virginia Zoo in Norfolk in November of 2016, and according to your CV, it was like that same month you were at the ZSL London Zoo. So how did this happen? How did you find out about it? And was it a difficult decision? You're leaving your home country.
Well, it definitely was not a difficult decision for me because I'm always up for an adventure. So I figure life is short and I only get one chance to live this life. So that wasn't a difficult decision for me. Also, ZSL has an incredible reputation and history and is known as one of the best zoos on the planet. So it wasn't a difficult decision. I had gotten to the place in my career in Virginia that I was kind of ready for the next step. I was very, very happy in Virginia. I didn't leave because I was unhappy. I left because I was ready for the next step of my career. I guess I just happened to be looking around on job postings online, and there's many different, international postings, and I just happened to see it, and I thought I would apply. And because they were looking for someone board certified, so I'm also board certified by the European College, and we have a residency here at London. And so the position that I have is to also oversee the residency. And so they needed someone board certified. And so I thought that maybe I could fill that position well and be competitive for it. So also because I'm board certified in America, I thought that might give me a competitive edge. So I just went for it.
Okay.
And I did a Skype interview, and then I came over for an in-person interview, which turned out to be like a 4-day interview essentially, which was pretty intense, but it all worked out.
Wow. Okay. So on your CV, you talk about, so you got your diplomat status with the American College of Zoological Medicine in 2014, and then your diplomat status with the European College of Zoological Medicine in September of 2016. So, was that just lucky? Because it seems like you got your board certification for Europe before you went to this job, or like how long in advance?
Yeah, so that was kind of a funny thing. So because it obviously took quite some time for me to get my visa and permission to work over here, it was kind of a drawn out process. It took a few months, as you might imagine. So the European College of Zoo Medicine, the zoo health medicine specialty, is a very new specialty. And for a few years, they had a de facto status period where you could apply and be accepted based on your credentials without taking an exam. So essentially, when I thought, because that period actually closed in April of 2017, I believe, and so when I thought that I might have a possibility of getting the London job, I thought I should just go for it because the period was going to close and then I would no longer have that opportunity. Also, there are quite a lot of Americans that have done that, I guess just to be more involved in the European community. They're still in America. They're American. A lot of them are American board certified in the zoo specialty, but it's kind of just a way to help strengthen and build the European college.
Okay.
Because it is such a small community, a lot of us collaborate across the ocean anyway. So anyway, I just applied for it.
Neat.
Because it was contingent upon me getting this job anyway, if that makes sense.
Absolutely.
So the timing just happened to work out very well. Otherwise, the stars kind of aligned and the timing worked really well.
Right.
Because I couldn't have gotten this job if I hadn't gotten that.
Yeah. Oh my gosh, that's amazing. And you didn't have to sit for a second board
Correct.
exam, but now
That
you do.
Kind of. Yeah, now, so they've closed that de facto period. Yes. So the only way to be boarded now in Europe in the zoo health management specialty is to do an approved residency and sit an exam. They don't have an experiential pathway for that.
Wow. Okay.
So it's very different. Yeah.
Wow. Okay. Yeah. And then and now you mentioned that at the ZSL London Zoo, you're actually overseeing the residency program there. Okay, cool.
Yeah.
All right. Well, we'll get that in a minute. But like, okay, so tell me about just like, okay, on a personal level, you got the job and then you're like, just like throwing everything out and selling everything, giving everything away and minimizing. And what is going through your mind and how are you feeling? And how do your parents and, other family and friends feel like you're leaving the country?
Yeah, I think I guess I was most worried about how my parents would take it, but they took it surprisingly well. My parents, I'm incredibly lucky that my parents have been supportive all along the way. And I've lived all over the place, so it's not that, unique for me to be away. And actually the time difference is only 5 hours from me to Eastern Standard Time. So it's not that much different than if I lived in California. My parents live in North Carolina. So while they would rather me be nearby. And in Virginia, they were, I was only 3 hours away. So that was really convenient because I could see them pretty regularly. I mean, everyone was really supportive and excited. And I mean, it was just an exciting adventure. It was, really fun. It was really fun to get rid of everything and sort of start anew and move over here with nothing.
Right. And, I remember the first time I left the country, the first place I went was Taipei, Taiwan. And I was not prepared. This was like before the internet was a big thing. I had no idea where I was going. I thought it was a tropical island. Well, it is an island, but and I had to find a place to live. And one of the most difficult things for me was it's very different. Like the way people live there is very different from the way we live in the United States. Did you experience any of that? Like when you went to London, like tall buildings, I don't know how many stories, but like, you're on the fourth floor and there's no elevator and that's just how it is.
Yeah, I mean, it's certainly different. And I have just a small little apartment here, you know, it's, yeah, I don't really know how to describe it. I mean, it's certainly different. I mean, it's certainly not the same as moving to Taiwan. It's England it's different in a lot of ways, but it's not that different, I
Okay.
guess. I don't know
How
how to
big is your
describe it.
fridge?
Well, it's much smaller than an American fridge. And it's one of those things where, like you were mentioning before, I buy a small amount of groceries, 3 or 4 times a week instead of buying a huge thing of groceries once a week like you do in America.
Exactly.
Little stuff like that, and not having a car, so I have to carry everything with me. So I only buy what I can carry.
Yeah.
But I really love that.
I love that too. I mean, I feel sorry for myself, even though like, oh God, you drive to the supermarket, you get this huge basket, then you've got this huge fridge, and some people have an extra freezer in their garage. And I'm
Yeah,
like, oh, poor us. But it's so
yeah,
much nicer to do it the way you're doing it.
yeah. And I'm just one person, so I don't need a ton
Yeah.
of stuff anyway, so it's a little easier.
Now,
Yeah, I think people are much less materialistic here and have much less material possessions than Americans do,
right,
largely just because of space, if nothing else. There's just nowhere to put all that stuff.
right.
But yeah, I guess that's one of the more significant differences.
And culturally, in the United States, I feel like, and this sort of goes hand in hand with having a big fridge because you don't want to leave your house. But culturally, are people more social and more community oriented in general in London, do you think?
Yeah, I think probably that's an interesting point. Probably also because everyone's flat is so small in the city, you don't want to sit in your tiny flat all the time. But also, one of the things that I love so much is sort of the pub culture, and everyone goes to the pub after work, to have a beer or whatever. And I do think people are more out and about in the city and going out or go to the pub for a drink more than in America, where you have to get in your car and all that to get to go see your friends at a restaurant and stuff.
Yeah.
So it's different. I mean, it's a metropolitan city where people walk and take the train and, go to their neighborhood pub and things like that.
Nice, neat. So now at this ZSL London Zoo, my imagination of your life is that you work from 4 a.m. till midnight because like Do you have a work-life balance, and how is that? Because there's 20,000 animals at this zoo. And
Yeah, that's a really good question. It is a lot of animals to look after, but we have a big team. We're very lucky, and that's one of the major reasons I wanted to come here also, was to be part of a team and not to be a solo veterinarian anymore, because that's a big responsibility and it's stressful and it's very difficult to have a work-life balance.
yeah.
Here, the philosophy about work-life balance is much healthier than it is in America, and I tell this to people all the time. My quality of life has improved dramatically, and that's one of the reasons I wanted to come here. We work 8 to 4:30. We have a 37-hour work week. Obviously, if we have to stay late, we stay late. We do rotate weekends, but there's 5 veterinarians, so we work 1 out of 5 weekends. My team, we also have a zoo that's north of here called Whipsnade Zoo. So between London and Whipsnade, there are 5 veterinarians, including the resident, and 6 nurses. So it's a reasonably sized team to take turns and rotate between, and so on and so forth. So
Wow.
I think it's reasonably distributed. Also, we get about 6 weeks off work for holiday a year, which is a dramatic improvement over the American lifestyle.
Unheard of.
So, and they say people in the UK work more and harder than anyone else in Europe. So I'd be really intrigued to find out our work-life balance of people throughout other parts of Europe. But I mean, it's a significant improvement over how I've worked in America, especially as a solo zoo veterinarian. You're on call 365 days a year. Even when you travel or on holiday or on the weekends or away at a conference, you're getting called, texted, emailed the whole time.
Oh my God.
And it's very stressful. And I have never, in so many years, I was a solo zoo vet for at least 7 years, and I had never taken a vacation where I was just gone and literally didn't get, a text message. And now I can go on holiday for 9 days and no one says a peep.
Oh my God.
And it's amazing because I do think it's so much healthier.
Yeah. Oh my God. So I didn't even think of that. Zoo vets, like, okay, in small animal medicine, it's still hard to take a vacation, and especially
Of course.
American Protestant work ethic culture, let's all work ourselves to death because I don't know, like death is better. I don't know what our issue is, but like in small animal medicine, it's relatively easy to get a relief veterinarian, but there's no relief.
Depending on where you are. And that's one of the really difficult parts about zoo medicine. And like I was mentioning, in Boise, we were very geographically isolated. And actually in Virginia, even though Norfolk is the largest metropolitan area in Virginia, outside of the Northern Virginia, DC area, there were no other qualified people to help take care of the zoo animals. So if you have an elephant or orangutan emergency, you cannot just call up, Joe, the dog and cat veterinarian, and ask him to come help. Like, it just doesn't work that way. And so it's very difficult in that regard, that an emergency can be an emergency where you might need to get back on a plane and go back home because there's no one else.
Oh my God.
Depending on where you are geographically, there might not be anyone that can come help or that's licensed to practice in your state. Like, for example, when I was in Idaho, like I say, the nearest zoo was in Salt Lake City, but they didn't have Idaho licenses to practice. You know what I mean? So, and it was the same in Virginia. The closest facility to us within Virginia was the Front Royal facility that's run by the Smithsonian, and that's about 3 to 4 hours away. So there was no one nearby that could truly help. I mean, you could take a small bird or a small mammal or a snake to a small animal practice, maybe, an exotics practice. But for giraffe and orangutans and elephants or venomous species or crocodiles, there's just no one there. So it's really difficult. I mean, we had great, technicians and nurses. I had 2 great technicians in Virginia. And so they would help, and I could tell them on the phone, please do, this, and this. But there's a limit to how much they can't do surgery if that's what the animal needs or something.
Absolutely.
So it's really difficult.
Oh my gosh. I hadn't even thought of that. Wow, like I just had an idea for like every city zoo, every state zoo, city zoo. Like you should ask like local small animal veterinarians to come in and like I don't know, train some relief zoo veterinarians. Not that that would be an easy thing, but that's just
Yeah.
like my heart. Like on the one hand, I was like super jealous and envious, but then I just saw the other
Now
side,
less so.
which is really sad and heartbreaking. Um, wow.
I mean, it takes an incredible amount of dedication. That's the thing. It's not just, it's something we do that because we're passionate about it. And the pay, is less than you would make in small animal, even as a specialist. The pay is, you don't do it for the money, that's for sure. You don't do it for the hours or the work-life balance, that's for sure. There are a lot of benefits, but there are a lot of also stressful factors. And many of these animals are, critically endangered and incredibly genetically valuable individuals, so
Right.
some of those things just make it's a big responsibility, as you might imagine. It's a big responsibility.
Yes, yes. And so this is the other question I wanted to ask you. You say you've got a great work-life balance and the culture there is totally different. But on the other hand, you've got this amazing job and it's got so many components to it. There's the animals, there's the wildlife conservation and the capacity building and publications and constant learning and contribution. So how, like okay, so they say you don't have to be here 24/7, but in your mind, how do you prevent yourself from, especially as an American? I mean, like I don't know. I feel guilty if I'm not working all the time. Like I don't even feel like I deserve to, take a day off, or I haven't accomplished these 100 things yet today. Therefore, I'm not done. So do you find
Yeah,
yourself
it's tough.
having to?
Well, certainly I've been through phases of my life where I felt that way. I think I've made the conscious decision now to take care of myself and enjoy my life. And it's like work hard, play hard. I work hard when I'm at work. And of course, if the animals need something, we are there for them, period, without question. But in general, I'm going to leave at the end of the day, when it comes 4:30, unless there's an emergency or something extremely pressing, I'm going to leave. And that's because, and my boss, really supports that. And I think it's important to protect ourselves and our mental health. And
Right.
I can do a better job if I take care of myself and I'm well rested. And you know what I mean?
Yeah.
Like burnout is real. I don't want to get burned out. I don't want to grow to hate this profession. I want to be healthy and be able to continue doing it for a long time. And I'm really protective of my life. And, you're not promised tomorrow. Life is short. And no one ever on their deathbed says, I wish I worked more.
Mm-hmm.
Like, I want to see my friends and family and go on trips and enjoy the city and do all those things. And of course, I'm dedicated to my profession and work hard and have paid my dues. And I'm going to continue to do that. But it has to be a balance. And I think we have to take care of ourselves. And I have the luxury of being at a place where I have backup. So if I'm on holiday, I can sleep at night knowing that there are qualified people there to take care of those animals, and I don't have to stress about it.
Mm-hmm.
And I don't have to lay awake at night wondering if an animal gets sick, what are we going to do? And that's a great comfort. That makes a big difference, but I think you just have to prioritize. I think there's a time, there was a time in my life where I worked really, really, really hard. And when I was studying for boards, I was working 50 hours a week and studying 20 hours a week. And so I've done that. Like I've done that, and I've come out on the other side, and now I have the luxury of getting to choose a little bit and prioritize. And I think it's important that we take care of ourselves.
Right. Right. So many of us, like anybody who goes through vet school can say that, like I worked my butt off And then I think that the perception is, okay, once you're done with that, then life should be, there should be some balance. And then there isn't,
Yeah.
then it's just like the never ending, you're okay. No, I'm just going to keep working like that forever, because that's what veterinary medicine is like. At least, in small animal clinical practice it can seem like that, especially in America. So
Yeah, certainly. I know. I really think we need to find a solution, because as I'm sure you're obviously well aware, with, people getting burned out and mental health issues and the tragedy of suicides and stuff, I think we have to take better care of ourselves and prioritize, our mental health and well-being. And yeah, it's really difficult. It's really difficult. And it is so different in America. Like, it's a total philosophy. It's a complete philosophical difference. Here, it's not like that. I mean, everyone works hard, but everyone wants to go home and spend time with their family and, or do the things that they want to do that are important to them. And so it's more of a healthy balance, and we all support one another doing that. And it's like, if my colleague is away on holiday, I might have to work a little harder that week, but I know that that's going to be paid back to me when it's my week to be on holiday. And so it's a way more supportive feeling than I've ever experienced in America.
Yeah, I don't know how we can import some of that culture over here. Maybe you could figure out how to bottle it and send it over. I'll be the American distributor.
It's also different, working also when I was at Zoo Boise and at the Virginia Zoo, those were city operated zoos. And so they were more government, and it was more of an 8 to 5, and they had HR departments and civil service commissions and things that regulate how employees are treated, right? And that's very different than, a privately owned small animal clinic where they're not governed by so many strict rules, if that makes sense.
Yeah, absolutely.
So I think that's a benefit too. And I mean, here, there are way more employee protections and things in place in Europe that protect the employee a little bit more, and make things a little bit more reasonable, and the time off and things like that. It's very different in a privately owned small animal practice in America, where there's much less oversight or regulation. So I think that's part of the challenge, is overcoming that. And of course, it's a business, so there are profit margins and a whole bunch of business stuff that I don't understand that have to be maintained in order to employ everyone and pay the light bill and pay everyone's salary. So I'm not sure what the solution is to that balance.
Yeah. There's a mathematical equation that needs to be very thoroughly analyzed in there as well. I totally appreciate it. It's not just a matter of.
Of course, yeah. And I'm not a business person, so I can't speak to that. I can't imagine how difficult it must be to operate, a small animal practice in a small business in America. Yeah.
Now, so you talked a little bit about the difficulty in America if you needed somebody to cover your zoo while you were on vacation because of state licenses. So do you have a license to practice medicine in England? I mean, is it like the Euro veterinary license where you can practice anywhere in Europe, or is it?
No, the UK has their own. It's the RCVS, and so. Luckily, I mean, it was easy for me because I'm American, essentially, and because I went to a, AVMA accredited school. I essentially just had to do some paperwork and pay them some money to get a license, and I got a license.
Really? Oh my God!
It's very easy. If you're from a non-AVMA school or another country like that's not within their system, you may have to take an exam and stuff. But for an American, it's very easy to come over and get a license. And I easily got a work visa because ZSL sponsored. You have to have someone sponsor your work visa, right? So you can't just come here and start working. And you can't work if you came as a tourist. You obviously can't work on a tourist visa. So they have all these visa rules and stuff. But luckily, because ZSL is such a big organization and has an HR department, they took care of all the visa stuff. And that actually took some time, quite quite a bit of time, at least like 8 weeks or more, to get the visa to come through before I could come here to work and before we could finalize everything. So there was quite a bit of paperwork and administrative stuff that had to take place before I could move here.
Okay. Okay. So, you've got this great organization that's sponsoring your visa, but, you make it sound sort of like it's a pretty difficult process. So it's not like, any small animal clinic, it would be no big deal. And it's probably sort of frowned upon just to import a bunch of American workers because they're going to be competing with, the people who
Yeah,
live
well,
there.
actually, they claim, and much like I don't understand the situation in America, they claim there's a pretty big veterinary shortage here. And so there are an incredible amount of foreign veterinarians from Spain, Italy. I've met tons of foreign veterinarians in the UK.
Wow.
So it's not that difficult. And I actually know other Americans. I have a friend who's working in Scotland, and it's not that difficult for someone to sponsor a visa if you want to come over here and work.
Wow.
The difference is, especially in small animal practice, the salaries here are way less than you would get in America. So for the average person, it's not really financially viable unless you just want to move to, Ireland or Scotland or England and make significantly less money than you did in America. That's one of the challenges, but there are quite a lot of people in the UK, for example, that come from Italy or Spain because they have a lot of veterinary schools in Italy and Spain and not as many veterinary jobs. So there are quite a lot of foreign veterinarians in the UK. And I don't know the different requirements for the different countries. It depends on the schools and what school you went to and all that stuff. It's
this is
fairly complicated.
Very fascinating. Okay, well, just one more question on that. But because in the United States, like if you want to get a state license in a different state, if it's been more than 5 years since you've taken the NAVLE, then you have to retake the NAVLE in most cases.
Oh dear.
Yeah.
Okay. Because I've been licensed obviously in Nevada, Texas, Idaho, Virginia, and most of the time, some states I would have to take a little jurisprudence exam, but for the most part, it was just filling out paperwork and paying a fee. But yes, every state is different. Like for California, they require you to take an exam.
Yeah, so that's the state exam. Not all states have a state board exam for veterinarians. Like Illinois did not, but when I moved to Arizona, I had to take the state exam. But I also like their application process was, if it's been more than 5 years since you took the NAVLE and now you're moving here, you have to take it again. And sometimes it'll depend on whether you've been working. You can prove that you've been working for that time or not. But there's so much variability. But a lot of states will require you to retake the NAVLE if it's been a certain amount of time. So you went to England and you didn't have to take a test. You just you went to another country and you didn't.
I just gave them some money and then they gave me a veterinary license.
Oh my gosh. Wow. All right. So I know it's getting close to your bedtime, and I don't want to take up too much of your time because, oh my God, I could talk to you forever. But tell me a little bit more about your current job now, stuff that you're working on that you're super excited about, and especially I'd like to hear about the zoo medicine residency program and how that works.
Sure. Oh goodness. So we stay very busy and there's a lot of things going on all the time. I'm still, because I'm still relatively new, I'm still trying to identify some field projects, and research specifically to work on. We also teach a lot of students. We teach veterinary students that come through from the RVC, and at ZSL we have a couple of master's degree programs, a certificate, a master's degree in wild animal health. And so we do a lot of teaching. The residency program is really good. We have one resident now who's about to finish, and we're actually advertising right now for our next resident. And so that's to make them eligible for the ECZM exam. So that's heavily clinical. It also has some graduate level coursework. They do research, a lot of different things.
And how many applications do you anticipate getting for this residency?
Oh gosh, probably a lot. Because I didn't I came in halfway through this residence time. I wasn't there for the last recruitment process, so I can't really speak to the details of how that's been done in the past. Again, because the ECZM Zoo Health Management specialty is very new, this is all still, we're sort of trying to figure it all out. Mm-hmm. So it's very different than the process is in America. Mm-hmm. And even the residency program is changing. It's ever changing. It's operated sort of halfway through the RVC, the Royal Veterinary College in London, and through us. So it's collaborative between the RVC. It's not run entirely through ZSL. So it's like everything, a little complicated. Like I said, I just got back from India to do some teaching. So we do a lot of teaching and speaking at conferences and things like that, publishing, and then of course taking care of the animals, which is our main job and our main priority, which takes a lot of our time. So, we stay pretty busy.
Mm-hmm. Do you have any favorite animals at the ZSL Zoo?
Gosh, I have lots of favorite animals. One of the major reasons I moved there was for the collection. We have an incredible collection. We have a lot of really unique prosimians, primates like pottos, bush babies, and cool, unique things that you won't see anywhere else. We have a lot of we have some really cool reptiles and amphibians. We have anteaters and sloths and tamandua, which are all some of my favorite animals. But we have a really cool collection. We also have a huge invertebrate collection and an aquarium. And in my previous institutions, I haven't worked very much at all with aquatics or invertebrates. And so that's really exciting to work with those new species. So it's kind of always ever changing, In the zoo, we always have animals coming and going, new animals, new exhibits. So it's always dynamic. It's, never the same. And that's kind of the exciting thing.
Well, Dr. Guthrie, we've talked about so many things, and I think anybody wanting to follow your path is going to get a lot of value out of this interview. But is there anything that I haven't asked you or that we haven't discussed that you would like to add in terms of advice for future vets that might want to become a zoo animal veterinarian?
Oh, gosh. What I would say for someone wanting to break in this field, it's changed a lot in the time that I've been out of school. Now the focus is heavily on doing internships. Generally what people recommend now is that they want a small animal internship, then sort of a zoo internship before residency, which is a lot. But these are really competitive programs. Also, one of the things in this business that's really important, much like academia, is researching and publishing. So I would say as a student that's trying to sort of be more competitive, doing research and publishing is really looked upon very well. Most people that get residencies now already have, one or more publications. So I think focus on research is really a good tip, and being sort of open to opportunities and working hard. I think with a lot of these sort of, I don't know as much about other specialties, but what I'll say about the zoo medicine specialty is that you don't necessarily have to be the smartest, but I think it's more about working hard and sort of being open to opportunities. And one of the things that's sort of always been successful for me is that I almost never say no to anything, which sounds like really bad advice. But for me, when people ever ask me, oh, do you want to help on this project? Or, oh, do you want to teach this thing? Or, oh, do you want to come here and see this? I always say yes. And that's always really paid off for me. And making connections with people and collaborating with people always ends up resulting in something really great in a long-term, really more opportunities. So that's I feel that's something that's really paid off well for me.
And you said, you don't say no to anything. I think, when you're just starting out your career and you're trying to find your place, that's great advice. And I guess the hope is that in the beginning, you don't say no to anything. And then you get to a point in your career eventually where you can start saying no.
Yeah, where you can choose. Yes, exactly.
Right. Okay. Well, last question. Is there any charity that you'd like to mention so that listeners could think about making a contribution to thank you for your generous time and advice?
Sure. Only if you want to check out zsl.org. ZSL is a really awesome wildlife conservation organization. We have field offices all around the world in more than 50 countries, and we're on the ground trying to save wildlife. So if you want to help save wildlife, that's a great way to do it.
Yeah.
Thank you.
Fantastic. No, thank you. What a great talk. It was such a pleasure meeting you and learning all about your world.
Yeah, you too.
Really brightened my day. So I hope you have a wonderful night and you have a good night's sleep. And thanks again, Dr. Amanda Guthrie.
Thanks. Of course, it was really great chatting with you.